I asked him this question: what makes you happy? What makes you happy? And maybe maybe you're like really good at being happy and like this is not an issue for you. Or maybe you think you know, like, hey, I know what makes me happy, but somehow happiness still is elusive. Somehow at the end of the day, you question, am I really happy? Or maybe you're just like, straight up, I don't know how to be happy, I've been trying for years, and I just struggle with happiness. So what makes you happy? We're going to talk about that. I think we're going to discover some things that you already know. I mean, a lot about happiness is things we know, we just need reminders about, we need to focus on the right things. But also I think that there's some things that you might discover in this sermon series that you're not aware of. There might be insights that really can help you be happy. So let's jump right into it. And if you have your bulletins, we're doing a little fill in the blank thing today. So if that's helpful for you, that's great. If you don't like it, that's fine. Forget I mentioned it. But that's there for you. This is not school. There's going to be no turning in your bulletins. But that's there for you. The first statement is happiness is more about a who than a what. Happiness is more about a who than a what. And you know this already. Let me tell you how you know this. The first place that you discovered this principle was back when you were a little kid. Because when you were out in the backyard, it didn't matter if you had a football or a baseball or just some sticks and mud. As long as you had the right who's around you, you were happy. Our little girl, Sophia, many of you know her, she's 6. She comes home from school, and she's got a room full of what's. She's got a room full of toys. But she doesn't want to go to a room full of what's, because she wants to go next door to the who's, to Addie and June and all the other little kids in her neighborhood. Because happiness is more about a who than a what, and you know that. Another way to think about it is happiness is always associated with a to or who, and you know that's true. That rhymes. Isn't that fun? Happiness is always associated with a to or who, or a who or to. And think about like when you were in high school. Some of us, that's way back, right? But some not as much. But when you're in high school, what mattered most was being part of the right group. And if you were part of the right group, if you were able to connect with whatever the cool group was for you, you were happy. And high school was a good time. But if you didn't, and some of us we didn't find our group, then high school was a terrible time because happiness is tied to a who or to. One other kind of thought about that, one other piece of evidence, if you're a parent, you know this, that your happiness, it's hard for your happiness to rise above the level of your children. So if your children are unhappy or if your children are going through something, it's really hard to be happy. This also can be the same if you have a spouse, if you're married, or if you got a significant person in your life. If your wife is unhappy, it's hard to be happy. Or if your husband is unhappy or if he's suffering, it's hard to be happy. Because our happiness is tied to a who rather than a what. Now, I kind of wish it was different, honestly. I wish it was the opposite way around. I wish that our happiness was tied to what's. Because if our happiness was tied to what's, it wouldn't matter how anybody treated me. Wouldn't matter if people were fair to me or kind to me. I could just get my happy what, and I'd be happy. And you could get your happy what, whatever that is, and we'd all be happy. It'd be really simple. But here's what we know about happy what's. Happy what's lead to happy what else. Think about your phone. When you got your phone, it was your new phone, and it made you happy. And that's okay, right? These things make us kind of happy. But you got your phone, it was your new phone, it made you happy, and then it became your old phone, and so you wanted a new phone. And so you got that new phone, that made you happy, but soon that new phone became your old phone, and just like your old phone, which made you happy when it was your new phone, this new phone is now an old phone, and it doesn't make you happy. Did you follow all that, right? And the same goes for your car, same goes for clothes. These happy what's, there's just no end to it. It doesn't bring sustained happiness. It brings a little bit of pleasure, momentary happiness, but not sustained happiness. And you know this. One last piece of evidence about this. At the end of your life, when you're reaching the end, you'll have relational, not possessional, regrets. At the end of your life, your regrets will be about relationships, not possessions. Ladies, at the end of your life, you're not going to say to your husband, hey honey, could you go home and get my shoe collection? Because I want to spend the last couple hours of my life with my shoes. I want to make things right with my shoes. Or fellas, you're not going to say to the nurse, could you wheel me out to the parking lot so I can spend some time with my car? Right? Because our happiness is tied to these relationships. And that's what's going to matter the most. Now, in a crowd like this, there's going to be a few people that would probably say something like this. I don't need anyone in order to be happy. I don't need anyone in order to be happy. I hear what you're saying, preacher, that we're designed with relationship in mind, but you know what? I don't need anyone. Now, there's two categories of people that would say this. The first category are people who are so relationally rich, they've had so many people around them, maybe they have a big family or just a great group of friends, that they don't think they need others because they've never needed others because they've always had others. They're relationally rich. It's like those of us who've grown up with plenty of food in the cupboard. We don't know what it means to need food because we never needed food. There's always been plenty of food. But those who have experienced food scarcity, they know that food is necessary. And so some of us, we've just been so relationally rich that we think we're kind of like out on an island and we can survive on our own. The other category are those who actually are isolated for whatever reason. Maybe you grew up in a family where even the best relationship is still a bad relationship. And so you just don't have relational options. And so you say something like this, I don't need anyone, as kind of a defense mechanism, as a way to cope with the fact that you can't fix your relational isolation. And that's understandable, but it's very dangerous because you were made with a relationship in mind. And there's others out there who God designed you to be in relationship with. And if you just stay on an island, if you think, hey, I can just do it on my own, then you're not only depriving yourself, but there's other people that need you as well. So changing gears just a little bit, happy people all have something, and it's not really a thing, but it's a quality. And it doesn't matter if they're rich or poor, it doesn't matter if they're young or old, but happy people all seem to have this one thing, and it's peace. Have you ever met a happy person and they have this sense of peace? And you look at their life and you're kind of wondering, they don't have many happy what's, so how is this person so happy? When we go on the Appalachian Service Project, this trip that we've gone on with our church last year, and I've been on so many times, one of the experiences I see over and over again is we go and we meet some people in poverty like we've never seen before, and some of those people are happy. They're truly happy, and it blows the minds of the volunteers because we think, we live in a culture filled with happy butts, and we think that there's a certain level of things we must have to be happy, but there's certain people that have peace and happiness despite not having a whole lot. So the first place that happy people have peace is with themselves. Happy people aren't warring with themselves. They're not like, battling within. There's not like some sort of internal conflict going on. Happy people, they've learned to accept themselves the way they are. Doesn't mean that they're lazy or they're not trying to grow, but there's a sense that happy people are at peace with themselves. The second group of people is that happy people have peace with others. Doesn't mean that they don't have conflict. Doesn't mean that they like everybody or everybody likes them. But they're not holding grudges. They're not like, waiting for that day when I get the chance to tell that person how I really feel or get them to finally admit that, yeah, they did that thing that I always expected that they did, but they never said that they did. Happy people, they're at peace with others. They've learned the art of forgiveness, and they have peace. There's a third category that happy people have peace with. And I'm not going to say all happy people, but I think most happy people. And it's happy people, they have peace with God. Happy people have peace with God. Somehow they figured out how to have peace with their Creator, and they're not necessarily religious people or church people, but they have this peace with God. They're not saying God owes me something or what have you. They just found peace with their Creator. Happy people have peace. Christians, and if you don't like the word Christian, that's okay, because Jesus never really called us to be Christians, and Christian is only used a few times in the Bible. But Jesus followers, people that are learning to see the world as Jesus saw the world and be in the world as Jesus was in the world, they've learned something about this dynamic between peace and happiness. And here's a statement about that. It says, peace with God, so when we get this relationship right, paves the way to peace with ourselves. Somehow when we get things right with God and we have an understanding, we develop peace with God, that paves the way to peace with ourselves. And then that equips us to make peace with others. In other words, when you're not finding peace with God and you're not finding peace within, you're going to be in conflict with other people. Happy people understand this dynamic about peace. And Jesus, he taught on how these three relationships, this relationship with others, with ourselves, and with God, he taught about how that is central to happiness. One day he's out doing his ministry, and somebody approaches him with a question, and all kinds of people ask Jesus questions. Some of them were really dumb questions, but some of them were really good questions. And they were always trying to trap Jesus, but occasionally somebody was sincere. And at one point in time, a lawyer, somebody who's well-educated, comes to Jesus and says, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" And this lawyer, he probably had his own answer. The Jewish people in that culture, if you understand it, they were always asking questions even if they had an answer. But this was a way to assess whether this Jesus guy, who had grown in popularity by this point, what was central, what was important, what was primary for him? What is the most or the greatest commandment? Now, if you don't know this, it's important also to know that there's 613 commandments. He had 613 options to choose from. But what is the greatest commandment? Jesus says, I'll answer that. And he replies, love. To which I imagine the lawyer says, wait, hold on a second. I asked you greatest commandment, like thou shalt not, thou shalt, like some rules, like something that, you can break. And Jesus, he says, no. I get the question. Love. It's like, love, that's a relational word. We're talking commandments here, like give me a list of rules. That's what we want here. And Jesus, I know what you're talking about. You want to know what's the most important? You want to know what the greatest thing is? It is this relational word. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. That's all your emotional energy. With all your soul, that's your integrity. And with all your mind, that's all your intellect. Ask questions, cast doubts. Give it all to God. Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like this, meaning you can't have the first without the second. And the second is like this. I know he asked for one, but there are two. We got to talk about two when we talk about this. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. We got God, we got others, and we got ourselves. At the center, what Jesus is trying to teach us about how to see the world and be in the world, which will ultimately lead to happiness and lead to us being a blessing around to the people around us. He's saying you need to invest in, you need to extend yourselves, you need to find peace with these three relationships. Now, if you're anything like I am, growing up, I didn't think that God was the way to happiness, as Jesus is kind of saying. I thought that God was in the way of happiness. Anybody feel that way growing up, right? Come on now, I'm not the only one here. My mom over there, right? Yeah, exactly. God was in the way of happiness, right? It's all about things I shouldn't do, and I better not go there, and I shouldn't be with those people, and if I do that, and that's going to make you blind, and this sort of thing, and that sort of thing. Yeah, right? Some people got that one. Yeah. God is in the way of happiness. But what Jesus, he's trying to teach us, no. It's quite the opposite. God provides the way to happiness. That when you have peace, when you find peace with God, you're no longer saying, you owe me, how could you? You find peace with God, it enables you to get peace within, and then equips you to make peace with others. This is key to happiness. So we're gonna talk more about this concept throughout the next month. But now we need to change gears one more time. And we got to talk about a word that none of you are going to like to talk about. Okay, but if we're really going to talk about happiness, if we're really going to find real happiness, we got to talk about this word. So let's just all say it together. Sin. Ugh. Anybody else? Come on now. Sin. Ugh. Right? And some of you have avoided church because of this word. Because people have thrown this word around and they've beaten you up with this word. And so we don't want to use this word. We'd rather say what word? Mistake. But sin is a far more powerful word. And I want to define it for you, or actually invite you to define it for yourselves. Just think of it in the most broad terms. Anything that you think is destructive, anything that you think is unhelpful, anything that you think others shouldn't do, that you shouldn't do, but you sometimes do, just think of sin in the broadest sort of sense. And I want to teach you a little bit about sin and what it does. The first thing to know about sin is that sin separates. Sin's effect is to separate. Sin separates you from others. You did something wrong, you did something you shouldn't do, or you didn't do something you should do, or they did, or whatever happened, but sin entered into a relationship, and that relationship has separated. There's distance. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Right? And if I was to ask you and that person, if you're really being run by sin, both of you would say it's that person's fault, and they would say, no, it's your fault because, something about sin, it just separates us. And we made a mistake. And we've done it before. And it separates. Sin separates you from God. I know somebody who engages or falls back into the same sin over and over again. Something that she has defined as destructive for herself. And when she falls back into it, what she told me is that she doesn't feel like she can come to church because she just feels ashamed that she fell back into the same old sin. And some of you have experienced this, that you think that, my sin, whatever it was, this mistake I keep making, there's no way that God actually can receive me even in light of this. And it doesn't matter how many times you've heard the good news, and hopefully you have heard the good news, that God actually is well aware of your sin. In fact, He knows way more about it than you do or you ever admit to. And He still calls you lovable and desirable. Yet for many of us, that thing we keep falling back into, whatever it might be, it creates this gap between us and God. It separates us. And finally, sin separates you from yourself. Some of you have been there. This is kind of the depths of depression at times. Well, all of you could identify with this phrase, and you can fill in the blank with whatever you like. If I ever fill in the blank, I would not be able to live with myself. Sin separates us from ourselves. The way that sin separates is by substituting. Sin separates by substituting. It separates us from fulfillment by substituting it with immediate pleasure. It separates us from people by substituting things. It substitutes all sorts of different things. We sacrifice what is eternal, what is most meaningful, our identity for these short-term things. Sin has this way of substituting, saying, hey, why not this instead of that? And it creates separation. Another way to think of it is that sin makes a happy promise that sin can't keep. Right? Like, why do we fall in victims to sin? Why do we go back to that thing that we would identify as destructive and not helpful? It's because there's a happy promise. And it kind of fulfills that happy promise, at least some sins, momentarily, doesn't it? There's a pleasure. There's a joy. There's something that we get from it. And it says, hey, if you just go ahead and go all the way down this road, you'll be happy. But it never, ever works out. It has the opposite effect. It's deceptive. It makes a happy promise, but it just can't keep it. Or another way to put it, and I love this kind of cracks me up, but sin is not your friend. Sin is not your friend. But there's a seriousness to that because that's the reason why we fall victim to these things, is because at a certain level, it looks like it's going to be good for us. There's a seduction. Sin is not your friend. Now, I want to show you one verse, and then we'll be done. We'll wrap it up with some concluding statements. But I want to show you this one verse. It's from the book of James. James is the brother of Jesus, which is pretty interesting. I just want you to think for a moment, if you had a brother, what would he have to do to convince you that he is your Savior? Right? Because that's what happened with James. And he wasn't a follower of Jesus. He became a disciple of Jesus after Jesus died and was resurrected. But either way, James, the brother of Jesus, writes this awesome book. It's at the end of the New Testament. I highly recommend it. And he says this, and this is the one verse. It says, then after desire, and you know what desire is, after desire has conceived, and look at the language here, okay? It's like, pregnancy language. After desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, like a little baby sin. Oh, isn't that cute? Do you see my baby sin? Isn't that cute? Oh, it's harmless. Little baby sin. And then, when it's full grown, sin gives birth to death. Anybody fans of big dogs, like really, really big dogs? Any big dog people in the place? Okay, right? Okay. And we have this big dog in my neighborhood. His name's Duke. And Duke, when he was little, he was a little really bitty doggy, and he was super cute and a puppy. But Duke is like a year and a half old, and he's like literally that big, okay? And Duke has an 8-foot fence in his backyard, and he can get over it. That's Duke, okay? And his owner can't catch him when he gets out. And when I go over to their house, Duke is friendly to me, but when he's out running around and like being wild, Duke, he's a menace. He growled at me, he bit one of the neighbors, and so he gets out when all the kids are waiting for the bus. Duke is just like this passage. When he was a little pup, he was so cute and harmless, but now he's full grown and Duke is a menace. And that's the way sin works in our life. We think, hey, that's not going to be a big deal. I can manage that. But it just grows, and it steals away our peace. And we war within, and we war with others, and we're not happy. So wrapping it up, some summary statements, and these are all in your bulletins. Since happiness is about a who and not a what, and since happy people are at peace with themselves, others, and possibly God, since sin undermines peace by separating and substituting, since Jesus valued and prioritized peace with God, ourselves, and others, and since you want to be happy, you might consider being a follower of Jesus. And if you're not ready to make that commitment, you might just consider coming back next week where we'll be talking about how to be happy again.